I want to bring to your attention a high-stakes election you probably haven't heard much about, but it could have massive implications for democracy in this country as we know it, and possibly the outcome of the next presidential election. And that is not hyperbolic. This Tuesday in Wisconsin, primary voting will take place to begin the process of determining the person who will replace a conservative justice on that state's Supreme Court. Now, the court currently leans right with a 4-3 conservative majority. But come April, when the general election takes place, that could all change. And it could have a big impact on some of the most contentious issues that court will rule on. Consider some of the state's court's recent rulings. In a decision last year, the court effectively banned the use of ballot drop boxes. And that was after it had ruled in favor of new Republican-drawn legislative maps. Those maps are coming under renewed scrutiny after it was recently revealed that a Republican member of the State Elections Commission, which drew those maps, said the quiet part out loud, writing in an email, Republicans can be especially proud of the city of Milwaukee casting 37,000 less votes than cast in the 2018 election, with the major reduction happening in the overwhelming Black and Hispanic areas. Democratic Governor Tony Evers has signaled action, directing his election lawyers to ask the court to invalidate the current map if the open court seat goes to a liberal-leaning justice. The election could also determine the fate of Wisconsin's near-total abortion ban, which was originally enacted back in, wait for it, 1849, and is currently the law of the land since last year's Dobbs decision. State Attorney General Josh Kaul filed a lawsuit alleging that the ancient law is unenforceable, and it could very well make its way to, you guessed it, the Wisconsin State Supreme Court. And that man, Wisconsin Attorney General Josh Kaul, joins me now. Mr. Attorney General, thank you so much for joining us. I greatly appreciate your time. Let's start here with the big picture, if I can. The chair of the state Democratic Party, Ben Wickler, has called this race the most critical election of 2023, both for Wisconsin and for American democracy. What are your thoughts on the upcoming election? Was I being hyperbolic in my characterization of it?
Well, first, thanks for having me back on the program, Ayman. And Chairman Wickler is exactly right. This is the most important election in America this year. We have a primary this coming Tuesday, and then there will be a general election early in April. But the Wisconsin Supreme Court is on a knife's edge. There's a one-vote conservative majority currently. This election is going to determine whether we continue to have a conservative majority or whether there's a shift in the majority on the court. And that's vitally important on so many issues in Wisconsin. And as you know, what happens in Wisconsin impacts the whole country. We've been the tipping point state in the last two presidential elections, and having members of our Supreme Court who are committed to protecting our democracy is going to be vital.
The race, as I mentioned, as you've suggested, it has attracted unprecedented amounts of national attention. The spending so far, just for the primary, has already topped $6 million in ads. The general election, it doesn't happen until April 4th. It could end up being the most expensive race in the nation. What does that tell you about just what's at stake?
Well, it's a reflection of how big the stakes are. And you can really see that by looking at some of the 4-3 decisions we've seen from our state Supreme Court. And you just highlighted a few of them, but prohibiting the use of most absentee ballot drop boxes, that was a 4-3 decision. Putting in place really extreme partisan gerrymanders for both our congressional maps and our state legislative maps, those were 4-3 decisions. Allowing a Scott Walker appointee to stay on until the Republican State Senate confirmed a replacement. That was a 4-3 decision. And if you go back to 2020, we were one of the states at the center of Donald Trump's efforts to overturn the results of the election. My office defended those cases in court, and we won every single one of them. But in most states, those cases were laughed out of court. In Wisconsin, there was a 4-3 state Supreme Court decision. But we prevented the election from really being thrown into chaos. That's not the kind of margin we want to see when it comes to our democracy. So electing one of the candidates here who believes in equal justice under the law and our democracy and will equally apply the laws is critical.
I'm so glad you brought up what happened in your state in 2020, because the big concern is, among the other issues that impact your state, if a conservative-leaning justice does in fact win this race, how concerned are you, should we be, about what this could mean for the next presidential election in 2024?
Well, I think we should all be concerned. Donald Trump is going to be on the ballot again. We all know what happened following the 2020 presidential election, and he is promoting folks around the country. He just endorsed a state Senate candidate who's an election denier in a state Senate special election here. There's a real possibility that there's going to be another effort to overturn the results of our elections in 2024. And having our court system hold people in key elected offices stand up for our democracy, it could very well be just as critical in 2024 as it was in 2020. And the Supreme Court election we have coming up is one of the crucial elections as we look ahead to what may happen down the road.
Let me ask you about abortion in your state. Last year, we saw the results of the Kansas abortion referendum. Voters overwhelmingly voted against making abortion illegal in a traditionally conservative state. With your lawsuit in the pipeline, with its potential final destination being the state Supreme Court again, how do you see abortion factoring into this race?
Well, it's already become an issue in the state Supreme Court race. It certainly was a major issue in our governor's race and in my reelection, which just happened this past November. I think it was one of the key issues in our being successful, both Governor Evers and me, because we were very clear that we are going to fight to restore access to safe and legal abortion. In the Supreme Court race, we've seen the two conservative candidates be endorsed by Wisconsin Right to Life. One of the conservative candidates said that she supported the overturning of Roe v. Wade and thinks that Dobbs was correctly decided. So there's no question that this is going to be an important issue in this race. But, our Supreme Court addresses issues across the spectrum. And so the results of this election are going to have an impact on so many different issues here in Wisconsin. And because of Wisconsin's significant national picture, in turn on the national political picture as well.
Can I ask you about these Republican-drawn legislative maps and whether or not there is any possible, now that there is renewed scrutiny given the emails that have emerged, is there any possible course of action that can be taken to undo these legislative maps?
I certainly think it's possible that we're going to see more legal action regarding the maps. The way this played out was that the governor proposed maps. My office represented him. We advocated for the adoption of the maps the governor proposed. The state Supreme Court set a very restrictive standard initially, saying that they were going to take the map that had the fewest changes from the prior maps, which were themselves gerrymandered. The governor initially won on some of those maps, but the U.S. Supreme Court threw them out. But there are a lot of issues that have not yet been litigated that I think very well could be litigated down the road.
Wisconsin Attorney General Josh Kaul, sir, thank you so much for coming back on the program. Greatly appreciate your time this evening.